Okay. Apologies for the damp morning, but we'll head off anyway. So this is our Gardening Unplugged talk, first one for winter, and today we're going to talk about trees for the area and look at some different possibilities. So when we talk about trees, we're really talking about, we group them into three different sizes: small, medium, and tall. And typically we talk about small trees as being anywhere from 10 to 20 feet. Medium trees would be anywhere from 20 to 50 feet, and then from 50 up would be a large tree. So good gardens are typically a combination of all three of those placed strategically together. We don't want to place trees too close together because then they create too much shade. So shade is another interesting thing that people don't always understand. You have what we call part sun, which is half sun, half shade. Then you have light shade, which is all day shade, but you can always see speckles of light on the ground. Then you have full shade, which means you see no light on the ground. Plant requirements are completely different. There are far more plants that grow in light shade or part sun than do in full shade. Full shade really does limit your ability to grow a lot of plants. It has to be things from the forest floor that thrive in those type of conditions. So in addition to sizes, we have to look at, is the plant deciduous or evergreen? So we like in a garden to have a combination of both deciduous and evergreen. That gives the garden interest in the winter. So if you look out here, you'll see that we actually have a pretty good canopy in the middle of winter. Most people simply focus on all deciduous trees, and in the garden in the winter, it looks pretty depauperate. So we really think that combination is very nice. So if we walk around, we'll look at some of those different types of plants. Right above us, we'll start. This is a redbud. Redbuds are, this particular one, Celtis canadensis, is an East Coast native, and this would be considered a small tree. These will be popping into bloom here in about another month. Behind us, another great small tree are the tremendous number of deciduous magnolias. This is a star magnolia, Magnolia stellata, just coming into a flower. The magnolias here are sort of hit and miss. If we could have a really hard freeze right when they come into flower, you'll lose the flowers. This year it looks like we're going to hit sort of in between freezes, which would be really nice, and we'll have some lovely blooms. In terms of evergreens, we have two types of evergreens: conifer evergreens and broadleaf evergreens. So an example of a conifer would be right here in front of you. This is a Turkish fir, Abies bornmuliana. This will eventually get over 60 feet tall, so it will be a large tree. But here it's much slower growing than it would be on, say, the West Coast. On the West Coast, you have a great differential between daytime temperatures and nighttime temperatures. That's what causes fast growth. The plant takes up a lot of energy during the heat of the day, and at night in the West Coast, it cools down enough so all that energy goes into growth. Here, the temperature stays so hot that we don't get the growth. It uses that for respiration just to stay alive. So our growth rate is a fraction of what it would be in a cooler a climate that cooled down. The same is true in the mountains of North Carolina. It cools down at night, so you get much better growth on these type plants than we would down here. But nevertheless, a wonderful, wonderful plant. Right behind us is another very interesting evergreen. This is called a Ketelaria. This was the late J.C. Ralston that started the Arboretum here in town. This is one of his favorite trees. You see the beautiful cones on it. Unlike the fir, it's much more open, so it allows things to grow underneath. When you're growing woodland plants, you need to be aware of what the light looks like. Most woodland plants grew up in an area that had deciduous shade. Deciduous shade means in the summertime there's shade, in the wintertime it's actually light shade to part sun because the plants have no leaves on the trees. So very different plants you can grow. So many things that we grow as woodland plants, many of the ferns, the hellebores, etc., those would not grow under evergreen shade. They will only grow under deciduous shade. Because when those plants are at their most active, which is November, December, January, February, March, there's no leaves on the tree. So they're actually getting more sun than you realize. So it's a key to really think about what type of shade and how that shade affects the plants. We also go in and we constantly are looking at limbing up trees. It's called raising the canopy. Because what happens, every layer of branches the tree develops as it grows causes more shade. That light has to pass through more and more limbs all the way down. So we're constantly taking the lower limbs off and raising that canopy. And by doing that, even under an evergreen, you're allowing the plant to have more light and have more success. So one of the taller trees right behind us, this is a lacebark elm. It's almost parvifolia. This is a beautiful plant. You see how incredible the bark is. The older it gets, the better it is. Behind that's another one that we think is a great tree. That is a tree lilac. That is a real lilac. That's called the Peking lilac. So that would be a mid-sized tree. That comes into bloom in May with beautiful white, very fragrant flowers. There are a couple of tree lilacs that actually are very good, but they're not grown very much in the South because people don't think lilacs grow here. We don't often think about hollies as being trees, but if you notice right over here, let's see if I can stand back here and not fall. This is Ilex chinensis. This is the Chinese holly. It's a fantastic mid-sized tree. If you were standing back further, you could see it is really still covered in fruit, but even a month ago, much better. Beautiful, tall, beautiful gray bark, and you see how we've limbed that up to really give it a tree form, whereas most hollies that majority of people grow are something you keep much smaller and use as a hedge. So a lot of neat possibilities there. Let's see, as we go through, let's go this way.
If you leave the lower limbs, does it stay shorter?
No, it doesn't affect the height. It continues to grow. All that does, only thing that does, now visually, if you were using as a block, you wouldn't want to do that because then you're able to see underneath it. But the only thing limbing does, it really just gives you more light underneath.
Okay. Yep.
So it's really a great thing to do. Broadleaf evergreens would be things like this. This is a Maculus. This is Maculus thunbergii. It's a native, this is actually my collection from Korea. A beautiful, beautiful evergreen. But again, it is open enough that you're still able to get light down underneath. And that's really the key with evergreens. If you're going to try to plant underneath them, you've got to either thin the limbs or raise the canopy to get light. Right above us is a magnolia. This is Magnolia floribunda. Just starting into bloom. This will get quite large. We had an ice storm take this out before. It was actually a trunk that big. We cut it to the ground and it is reflushed, but gives you a wonderful, if it was a little warmer today, you'd be able to smell the fragrance out there. But again, this is an open. It's not dense like many of the conifers, so we're able to grow things underneath. Now I talked about layering with taller trees. Behind us is our native loblolly pine, Pinus taeda. And obviously that is a large tree. So this is what, if you live in the east, this is what your house is probably built out of. This is what the forest people grow. And this was planted in 1995. So that is 28 years old from a seedling. So the growth rate's pretty fast. You see why they use them for building. Couple of interesting trees here. This one is one of my favorite mid-sized trees. This is called a pterostyrax or false styrax. Styrax are getting fairly common. They're a plant that's native to the U.S. as well as Asia. But this is false styrax, are all Asian. They have beautiful dangling clusters of white and yellow flowers in late spring. A really nice tree, and I like it because it's thin. It doesn't take up a lot of room in the garden. Right beside that, here is a crepe myrtle. Everybody seems to focus on the shorter hybrid crepe myrtles. We would rather focus on the taller species trees. This is Lagostremia limii, a beautiful, almost completely unknown species with light lavender flowers. And again, I love the bark. You'll see several as we walk around today that have extraordinary bark, some very smooth, some very rough. I'm a lover of Carpinus. These are amazing trees. This is Vienna weeper, a lovely weeping. So you can, not only do trees grow up, trees have all kinds of different shapes. They're conical trees, they're wide spreading trees, they're trees with weeping habitats. And this is one Vienna weeper that I like. This is almost 30 years old now. So it's a really nice small sized tree, but gives you something very different. A lot of Japanese maples in the garden, which you can see like right here in the middle. And those are generally going to be considered a small to medium tree. And they add, what we like on those is they add the color to the summer garden with the, or spring and summer garden with the foliage. Here is one of the most common evergreens, and this is a cryptomeria or Japanese cedar. Very widely grown. Some of them get quite large, some of them are very dense, some are very open like this one. This is one called yellow twig. So again, it's open enough that you're not going to suffer growing things underneath it. Here's another great small tree. This is our native almost. This is one called, now I just blanked. This is one introduced by the Ralston Arboretum, lace parasol. This was discovered as a seedling that had a beautiful canopy, almost a weeping habitat, a weeping habit as well. This is also about 30 years old, so that's never going to get any larger than what you're seeing there today. Yes? It's an elm. Mm-hmm. What was the question?
This is the local feline.
I missed that. You'll also see today a lot of hemlocks. These are still small. These will get very large and very dense in time. It just so happens they don't grow really fast here. So if that were up in the mountains, this would be 3 times as large. But because of our hot summer nights, it's much slower growing and really stays a real nice effect in the garden. There's a whole series of maples all through the garden. This is just one of many that you'll see today. This is Acer henryi. This is one of the Asian maples. And then above us, a deodar cedar, another of the evergreen conifers. Deodars also are very open, so they allow you to grow a lot underneath them. Now take a look at the loblolly pines in here and see how we've raised the canopy. If we had not, we would be growing almost nothing underneath those. So we have to constantly be lifting that skirt up. One of my favorite evergreens is this, broadleafed evergreens. This is a hardy cinnamon tree. This is the genus Cinnamonum chikungensis. This is one from China, and this is one of the trees that real cinnamon actually comes from. The most common one would be Cinnamon camphora. That's grown in giant groves, and that's not winter hardy here, but this one is absolutely fabulous. The thing about most evergreen trees, broadleaf evergreens, are they're very susceptible to ice damage in the wintertime, so we get a lot of freezing rain. The beauty of this one is the limbs are flexible. The limbs will never break. This one, the limbs are sort of like Gumby. They just fold right down, and as soon as the ice melts, they go right back up. But a lot of broadleaf evergreens, you'll see after a big ice storm, everybody says, well, I'll never grow another broadleaf evergreen. Well, that's not a good idea either, but just be aware that if you do have an area where you have a lot of ice, that those are going to be problems. Right up by the side of the house, you'll see one of the amazing evergreen magnolias. Was in full bloom. We got 28 a couple of nights ago, so it knocked the existing flowers out, but they'll be right back. That is Magnolia platypetala. There are a ton of evergreen magnolias. We have some native in the US, a lot more native to Asia. That absolutely incredible plant. So that's about 30 years old as well. You can see the cinnamon a lot better from up here. It's just such an amazing, amazing plant. We don't talk a lot about them as trees, but the palm trees. This is the windmill palm. These are from the Himalayas. These are they're from very cool regions. So it's amazing they actually do as well as they do here. And that again is a tree that, because it doesn't have a lot of breadth, it gives you a lot of room to grow things underneath it because it's not producing so much shade. Another evergreen tree that's one of my favorites is a small tree. These are loquats. Loquats are amazing trees because they grow fruit. They have incredibly fragrant flowers, beautiful clusters of white flowers at Christmas time. So they're great for making Christmas decorations. And if our winter temperatures don't go below 20, you'll have edible fruit the following spring. We talked about Japanese maples earlier. I think this is one of the most interesting Japanese maples. This is Kashima. It looks like it's naturally been cloud pruned. That has never had a pruner hit it. But it's unlike most of them that you see, which are very upright. And that's the neat thing about Japanese maples. You can get all sizes and all forms, but that's a particularly fascinating one. Another great broadleaf evergreen tree that I love is the, sorry, my mind's blank, Daphne-phyllum. This is Daphne-phyllum macropodum. It too will get about 3 times that size with great age. This is about a 25-year-old plant, but beautiful, beautiful presence in the winter garden, and it does have clusters of blue fruit. Above that is one of the deciduous magnolias, of which there are many. You'll see several starting to pop into bloom around here. Again, we get cold, we tend to lose some of the flowers, but they're still amazing because when you get a good year, they're absolutely incredible. We talked about interesting forms and shapes, and here's a good example. This is a hackberry of the genus Celtis. This is Celtis sinensis, and this is one called green Cascade. I think architecturally that's one of the most amazing plants that we grow. It is extremely fast growing. It will easily grow 10 to 12 feet when it's young, a year. It's pretty amazing. Right behind that you see the beautiful sort of brownish bark. This is another great small tree that is sadly misused. This is called Loropetalum. This is Loropetalum chinense. Many people grow this as foundation shrubs, and they wind up after a few years with a trunk this size. It is a small tree. It is not a shrub. It's not a foundation shrub. But you see how amazing it looks when you grow it correctly. And this was just getting ready to come into bloom before it got cold the other night. So now it'll take it a couple more days and be back in full bloom. Now, not all conifers are evergreen. And you can tell by looking at the alley down here, these are metasequoia. These are dawn redwoods. Dawn redwoods are a native to China, where they were rediscovered back in the 40s. Interestingly, there are plenty of fossils of dawn redwoods that have been found in the US. So they used to be native here as well. So native is not a place in location, native is only a place in time. A lot of people fail to get that concept. But a beautiful tree, this is a gold leaf form called ogon. These are actually the oldest ogons in the United States. The evergreen tree at the top is one of the most amazing plants. That is in the rose family. That is a plant called Elaeocarpus. You would find this grown much more out in California than you will in North Carolina, because it's not supposed to be winter hardy here. So we had to grow a number of seedlings to actually select one that's winter hardy. But the cool thing about it, it flowers in August, and it is one of the best bee attractant trees that exist. So August is typically a dearth time for bees to get nectar, and that is absolutely fantastic at that time. Okay. One of my favorite broadleaf evergreens is this. This is called tree ivy. This is the genus Dendropanax trifidus. A beautiful small tree. This is 35 years old, so it's never going to get much taller than that. Has beautiful black fruit and just amazing form in the winter garden. On my right, this is another great tree that everybody uses incorrectly. This is a yew of the genus Taxus. Everybody takes yews and clips them into little meatballs. Whereas if you grow it as a small tree, it's quite incredible. With beautiful bark, just great canopy, and it's open enough you're able to grow a lot of neat things underneath. So we looked earlier at some Japanese maples. I wanted to show you a full-size Japanese maple. This is more the size. So true Japanese maples are not small trees. They're more medium-sized trees. But a lot of the cultivars were selected in Japan for being shorter and more dense, as we saw earlier. Behind us, one of my favorite trees, now we consider that a large tree, is a crepe myrtle. This is Lagestremia faurii. Only native to one island off the southern coast of Japan called the Ryukyu Islands. This Lagestremia faurii is incredible. It grows the size of an oak tree. So it is a large tree. We typically think of crepe myrtles as being more small, but that is the true wild species, which I think is pretty incredible. And above me is another hemlock. This is our oldest hemlock, 35 years old now. Again, if that were in the mountains, it would be double to triple that at this point in time. Now, earlier we looked at one of the lilacs. Here's the other tree lilac. This is the cherry bark lilac, Syringa reticulata. Bark looks exactly like a cherry, but has these incredible fragrant white flowers in late spring. Reticulata. It's the cultivar ivory silk. Right above us is a really neat tree in fall. This is another Japanese tree. This is the genus Cercidophyllum. Cercidophyllum means the plant that looks like a cercis, which is a redbud. Beautiful round foliage, but the neat thing in fall, when it starts to turn in early October, the leaves smell exactly like cotton candy. And from about 20 feet around, it'll just, all you can do is get the fragrance of cotton candy. So it's a really neat. Normally this is an upright tree. This is a particular a weeping form called Cercidophyllum japonicum pendulum. Yes?
That's a weeping form. How did you get the trunk so straight?
The weeping forms will do that, yes. When it's young, yes, as long as you let them go. There's two. There's actually several. The Cercidophyllum japonicum pendulum and Cercidophyllum magnificum pendulum. The magnificum pendulum is more arching like this, whereas japonicum pendulum goes more up with pendulous branches. Very cool. It's a lovely tree, and it just doesn't take up a lot of room. We talked earlier about the dawn redwoods. This is another dawn redwood. This is our oldest. That's 35 years old now, so they do get quite incredibly huge, but beautiful tree. Now we did a little experiment here. We took the tree and then we planted a ground cover euonymus fortunii, what you would pick up at a box store, right at the base 35 years ago, because we wanted to see could we create an evergreen skirt on a deciduous tree. And 35 years later, it's actually worked pretty good. So it's just a fun little experiment to do with your trees. One of my favorite trees, because it's the only hardy tree with green bark, is called parasol tree. This is the genus Fermiana simplex. It looks very tropical. It has big tropical leaves. It has really crazy fruit that look like a giant umbrella with little heads attached underneath when it flowers in the fall. But really fascinating tree, and hardy well down below 0 Fahrenheit. And this is some more of the deciduous magnolias right in the middle, not in bloom yet. This is one of the beautiful yellow flowered magnolias. So that would be in flower probably in another 2 to 3 weeks. Now we looked in the back at the weeping, the weeping hackberry. This is the same species growing upright, not weeping. This is straight Celtis sinensis. I think it's absolutely beautiful tree, very shiny dark green leaves. And it also is quite fast. Now above us is a little bit rangy, but I love this tree. This is an evergreen oak. There are as many evergreen oaks as there are deciduous oaks. It's just the deciduous ones are the ones that are better known. So they kicked this out of the genus Quercus because the flowers face up instead of hang down. Everything in the genus Quercus has pendulous catkins. These, they face up. And the cool thing about it, it flowers twice a year. And it's a beautiful floral show in June and again in October. This is Lithocarpus henryi. I think it's just one of the just finest trees we grow. Another beautiful small tree. This is Cynanthus. This is called Granny's graybeard or fringe tree. And the fringe trees, you have U.S. natives and you have Asian natives. They're all beautiful in flower. But in the wintertime, the Chinese native, of which this is much more architectural. The furrowed bark and the form is just absolutely amazing. The native one flowers a little early. This one flowers a little later. This is Cynanthus retusus.
Does it have any fragrance?
It does. Oh yes, absolutely.
Does the native one?
It does, very much. You got to catch it at the right time. But yes, absolutely does. I'm passing by a lot of things, so if you see anything that you have questions, please ask, because there's a lot of trees in here. This is another of the dendropanax we looked at earlier. This is more of the Korean genetics, which is very different from the open macropodum we looked at earlier. The pine in the back, that is Pinus parviflora. It's a very famous Japanese pine. And this is actually, they've selected a lot of dwarfs. This is one of the dwarfs. So dwarf is a really important word that's misunderstood when it comes to trees. Dwarf means somebody has a taller one. Dwarf is not a size. Just remember that, it's all relative. So yeah, we put that in expecting it to mature out at 8 feet tall. So it obviously did not. Parviflora means, or parvifolia means, parvifolia means small foliage. Parvi is small. Parviflora means small flowered. So anytime you see those words, you go back to the Latin roots. Let's see, we'll wind up this way and then we'll wrap this up. I see another magnolia getting ready to start blooming out here in the front, another of the saucer magnolias. And there's a load of saucer. This one actually is just getting ready to pop into bloom as well. So you see, these get quite tall with age. Oh, it is. It's not something you hear a lot of people talking about, but very much. I think one of my favorite trees in the entire garden is this one right over here. This is a Zelkova serrata, sometimes called false elm, or it's absolutely amazing. This one actually has variegated leaves. It has white edged leaves that are incredible. It's the cultivar Goshiki. That would be about a 32-year-old plant now. But the bark is just incredible. A plant most people don't think about growing are these giant specimens here. These are black walnuts, Juglans nigra, because all the books say that you can't grow anything underneath a black walnut. Well, with every myth, there's a tiny bit of truth. It does secrete a toxin, juglone. But if you prepare your soil organically, you have good microbial activity, the microbes break down the juglone and flush it out. So not a problem. It's only when people do things like put out lots of salt-based fertilizers and kill all the microbes that the plants die because the juglanone kills them. So really pretty incredible, very stately trees. Another interesting tree right here behind me, this is the Iranian ironwood. This is native to Iran. Used to be called Persia. You can't call it Persia anymore, so it used to be Persian ironwood. Beautiful bark, depending on the seedling, can be incredibly mottled, but a great mid-sized tree, and probably the last tree to drop its leaves. It can range anywhere from yellow to red, depending on your seedling, but quite beautiful. This is a really neat tree. I see I got one leaf left on it that I love. One of my favorite small trees. This is a maple. That's a maple. This is the hornbeam leaf maple, Acer carpinifolium. Carpinus is the genus of hornbeams. So somebody, when they found it, they said, damn, that looks like a hornbeam. And then when we started looking at the parts, it's like, no, but it's a maple. So it's great to, it's just a beautiful plant, but it's great to fool your gardening friends in the plant ID time of your party. And we talked earlier, we showed you one of the evergreen oaks. Here's another one. This is Quercus myrcenifolia. You see a lot of this when you get up into Northern California. This is very popular. There's some really old specimens around here, but it's not grown nearly as much as I think it should. But there's some really old 100-year-old specimens in Raleigh. And we're walking under our old water oak, which had a really rough life back in the 50s. Unfortunately, we're getting ready to lose it. We knew it has been hit by fungus for years, and we'll be mourning that pretty soon, but a really neat native. So I have way gone over my time. I will stop here. Do you have any questions of anything we've seen? And
I have a question.
Yeah.
About the hanging baskets.
Yeah.
The
Yes.
the
Yeah.
ferns.
Yes.
Are those hardy in the
Those
basket, or do you put them out?
Those have been out for 4 years now. They have never come in. They went through 11 degrees last year.
Wow.
Yeah, we've been trying to explain to people, these are incredible, because most people have to take their fern baskets in the winter, so all you gotta do is grow perosias.
Okay.
They're incredible because they are natural epiphytes, so they're used to growing hanging off trees. So they are just fantastic. I think the world of them. And it's a great way, again, to add interest in the winter garden when the trees drop their leaves.
Second question.
Yeah.
Where can you get some of these interesting trees now that architectural trees is closed and they're not?
You're going to have to.
You don't sell any trees.
No, that's not our thing. You're going to have to look around. A lot of these things can be brought in from the West Coast. The majority of trees, because of the growth rates, are grown in the Pacific Northwest. Go to your garden center with your list and say, can you get this from your sources? Because they have several great nurseries that can bring the material in. You can always start small. So they're good mail order nurseries. Locally, well, actually one local that you can go to is Garden Treasures. They carry an array of really crazy stuff that you won't find anywhere else. Mail order, Mr. Maple is probably one of the top in the country right now. They're actually in Asheville, North Carolina. They don't just carry maples, they carry a ton of other stuff. And there are a few others, but we've lost so many of the great woody plant nurseries that we used to have. There's just not as many opportunities out there. So, we always go online and look, and sometimes you'll find them, and sometimes maybe not. But the more you ask about the plants, the more they'll get them. It's sort of the classic chicken and egg. If the garden centers have a lot of people asking, they will tell their suppliers. Their suppliers will figure out where to get them. We give starter material to nurseries all over the country. They come here and we'll give them signs to graft with, because we want to get these trees out. It's just that's not what we do. So great question. Other questions? Yeah.
I have a syringe of and I'm wondering, do they need more shade?
No, they actually,
Right out in the...
they need full sun. They're very tolerant of shade, interestingly enough. When we planted these were out in complete full sun. Now they're starting to get a little shade, but no, it should be great for you. All right, great. Any others? Thank you all very much. All right.